Good morning and a warm welcome to this very special virtual Action Mesothelioma Day 2020. My name is McKinley and I am the current chair of the UK Mesothelioma Alliance. This national virtual event includes a mix of patient stories and clinical expert presentations. And as with previous Action Mesothelioma Days, it is a time to raise awareness of the dangers of asbestos, recognise and remember those affected by mesothelioma, and for individual charities to raise vital funds. A little about the UK Mesothelioma Alliance. The UKMA was established in 2017 to bring together mesothelioma stakeholders as one voice and to raise awareness. We have a website and here are some of our members. The UKMA believes that equitable access to treatment and care wherever patients are in the UK is crucial to improve outcomes, and that raising awareness of mesothelioma and the dangers of asbestos is vital to both increase early diagnosis and reduce exposure to asbestos. We meet regularly to discuss our projects, and these include developing an Action Meso Day archive, Action Meso Day 2021 and beyond, and to date supporting the development of a mesothelioma service specification and optimal pathway. NHS England have developed this in the form of mesothelioma metrics. The metrics are currently on hold due to COVID-19, unfortunately, but we hope they will be released to NHS trusts soon. Mesothelioma UK funds a team of over 25 dedicated nurses. It is my pleasure to introduce one of these nurses. Sarah Morgan is a mesothelioma clinical nurse specialist in Wales, and she has been a nurse for over 30 years. She will speak to you today about supporting patients with mesothelioma.
Diolch yn fawr, Dawn. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Bore da, croeso bawb. Good morning and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today. Mae'n bleser I siarad gyda chi heddiw. And diolch yn fawr to the Asbestos Alliance for inviting me to speak. Especially that this is a new virtual Action Mesothelioma Day. I'm Sarah Morgan and I'm Mesothelioma UK Specialist Nurse for Wales. And I'm actually based in Hywel University Health Board, West Wales. And I'm able to see patients in clinic and in all the hospital sites there throughout West Wales, Ceredigion, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. And I can also offer support to patients throughout Wales and those affected by mesothelioma by phone and by email, and throughout support group meetings. I work very closely with all the clinical teams throughout Wales in all the health boards, and especially with the lung cancer nurse specialists. We work together to try and develop education and support for all professionals involved in the management of people affected by mesothelioma. Also working very closely with ASC, Asbestos and Awareness Support Cymru, who are the asbestos support group for Wales, supporting everyone affected by asbestos disease. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Mesothelioma UK charity. Meso UK became a charitable trust in 2009, and at that time were funding 2 specialist nurses embedded within the NHS, and since then have grown amazingly and are now funding many more nurses, are funding research and funding resources, funding developments and projects with the resource team and funding a resource centre. There's a massive amount of work that Mesothelioma UK charity are now contributing to throughout the United Kingdom in the pursuit of improvement for services for patients with mesothelioma. There are approximately 2,700 patients every year being diagnosed with mesothelioma throughout the United Kingdom, and this is classed as a rare cancer, although that is a significant number of people every year, and that number is not getting any less. but many professionals and everyday people that you meet have never heard about mesothelioma, and certainly don't really know very much about how mesothelioma is diagnosed, what the effects are, what causes it, and so many people are in need of further understanding. The National Mesothelioma Audit Report has just been published by the Royal College of Physicians and funded by Mesothelioma UK charity. This is the 4th report, and it shows improvements in survival of people affected by mesothelioma. It shows more inclusion and involvement of specialist nurse assessment and support for people with mesothelioma, and it shows greater discussion being documented in multidisciplinary team specialist mesothelioma meetings in hospitals. This data can be used by all those responsible for commissioning and providing mesothelioma services throughout the United Kingdom, and therefore ensuring improvements can be continued to be made in quality of care for all people diagnosed with mesothelioma. And I want to highlight the importance of the Mesothelioma Patients Charter that's been put together by the Mesothelioma Alliance. This is a document that has been put together by many experts in their field, patients, professionals, clinicians, all those affected by mesothelioma and in the management of mesothelioma. This is so helpful for us to be able to argue our case when we need to speak with government, speak with employers, speak with NHS health organisations. The part of my role which is most precious to me and so humbling is to work with people diagnosed with mesothelioma, and this is possibly one of the most vulnerable times of their life, and to be able to support somebody in that situation and really feel as though you are able to make a difference with the knowledge and with the expertise that we have in Mesothelioma UK, it is just very precious to me to be able to do that. It really has been a pleasure to be given the opportunity to speak with you today. It has been a very difficult time for everybody with the COVID situation, and the noises with the birds and the mowers and the farmers in the field back there have been causing trouble, I think, for the recording of this. But in reality, it's been an extremely difficult time for patients diagnosed with mesothelioma. Many trials have been on hold, and many services have been stopped, and treatments have not been able to proceed in the way that they would have been otherwise. So it has been an extremely, really hard, very difficult time for people. And at this time, providing support has never been more important. It is a shame that we cannot be together personally in one room discussing with one another all matters of mesothelioma, but on the other hand, it is lovely that perhaps many people who wouldn't be able to join us in one place, in one venue, can join us virtually, and therefore many more people perhaps can be with us today. So that is lovely, and it's wonderful to be able to speak with you.
We will now observe a minute's silence in recognition of Action Mesothelioma Day.
So I'd like to introduce to you Mavis Nye, who's speaking next. Mavis is the most amazing meso warrior that you'd ever wish to meet. She was originally diagnosed with mesothelioma in 2009 and has been through so many trials and so many treatments. I'm sure she will tell you all about this. She has been awarded the British Citizenship Award for services to healthcare, and that was in 2016. And she has also, along with her husband Ray, been awarded a doctorate, an honorary doctorate from the East Kent University. So I'm delighted to hand you over to listen to Mavis and Ray. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much for listening.
Good morning. This is my story. This has been a weird year with the coronavirus. Who would have thought when we were bringing in the new year, we were bringing in a deadly virus that kept us shut up in the house for so long. We went to Meso UK's Ladies' Day in Manchester, and the tube was so packed we decided to isolate when we got home. But then we didn't get a choice. We received a letter from the government and a phone call from our GP asking if I would sign a do not resuscitate. I said I've already given my hospice my end of life wishes, and they have them locked up for 11 years. So no, I won't sign anything. He said, I knew you would say that, and laughed, bless him. I had a call from my doctor at the Royal Marsden to say my scan results show stable and no growth, but we are stopping the trials and treatment for 2 months. Okay, I thought, that would be a nice rest. But a scan May the 11th showed that my meso had grown and is now on the lining of my spine. The next week I was back in treatment. After 11 years of fighting and being positive, I was back to square one and plus. 11 years ago I just returned from my 2 months holiday in Spain with our son and daughter-in-law, and I had been very troubled with a pain in my back and a numb arm, and I had an x-ray. I was awaiting results when I went up the road to vote. I suddenly couldn't breathe, so I asked Ray to get me back home. The phone was ringing, and it was my GP telling me to get to A&E as a bed had been arranged for me, and because the x-ray had shown a mass. They drained my lung immediately, and I could breathe again. But they had drained 7 litres of fluid. The prognosis was 3 months, as I had mesothelioma. This started 4 years of chemo until I became too toxic. I had edema, peripheral neuropathy, and I kept falling over. I had to use a walking frame on wheels. I was in a bad way. I then asked for a referral to the Royal Marsden. There I went on a phase 1 trial, MK347528, and that saved my life. Sadly, the other 2 patients with me, they passed. I had complete response on the 2-year trial. I had 2 years freedom then, where we formed my foundation as I wanted to give back to the NHS and to help the meso warriors that I supported on social media. The meso warriors have grown as a community from around the world, and they natter away every day helping each other. We signpost them to other support groups, and we raised over 80k, so the foundation is able to provide a Meso UK nurse at East Kent, which was my dream and is now my legacy. Also, we have provided a research grant to Simon Bolton. I've attended so many conferences, and the Asbestos and HSE world have taken me to their hearts and promote the charity, raising so much money. I'm so pleased so many are behind me. I've been in so many Zoom meetings now, and I don't have to travel, so I have kept safe. Then I got the devastating news that my meso had grown, and I re-challenged the drug. I had 14% shrinkage in 4 months, and then the cancer got crafty and grew again. I went on the hyper trial, which is the Pembro and gordicidabine, can never say it, which is a drug to help the Pembro to work again. I had 2 stable scans with growth and then a stable one with no growth. That is when I halted treatment, but that has allowed the meso to grow onto my spine. Now back in treatment, it's a different world. Ray has to wait in the car and I have to stop just in the door and sanitise my hands and tell the man on the door where I'm going. I walk the corridors, not meeting another soul sometimes, and only 2 of us can go in the lift anyway. The ward is fine as I know all the nurses there, but most of the chairs are gone, so we can do social distancing. The curtain is pulled round me for protection and I wear a mask. But on the good side is the fact the bloods are soon done and the drugs are made up quick. I've bloods done Monday, Pembro on Tuesday and 1 injection, and then Wednesday, Thursday and Friday it's straight up to get the injection and home again. That's a 750 miles in 1 week. Then I get 2 weeks free. It has meant I have time for all the Zoom meetings, so I have had a great time. We have even celebrated our diamond wedding on Zoom, which was a great party. It seemed the whole of the social media celebrated with us. Thank you to all the people that have donated to my foundation. The highlight of these 11 years was the British Citizen Award and the honorary doctorship that we received last July at Rochester Cathedral. The first couple they had presented the award to. This was a magical day, just like a film set, with superb music and trumpets and fanfares. I just want to say really that we must always have hope, and that's what I've had all through these 11 years, was hope that I would survive. I was so positive, and I'm not going to give in, and I will find another trial. I'd like to introduce you to Sanjay Popat. It gives me great pleasure to do that because he is at the Royal Marsden and I meet him at many conferences and we have become great friends.
Well, hello everyone. My name's Sanjay Popat. I'm a consultant medical oncologist at the Royal Marsden Hospital and Professor of Thoracic Oncology at the Institute of Cancer Research. I'm also clinical lead for the National Centre for Mesothelioma Research, and on behalf of the Mesothelioma UK Alliance, I'm delighted to speak at the virtual Action Mesothelioma Day about mesothelioma research in 2020 and beyond. These are my disclosures. So, why do we need to research into mesothelioma? There are multiple reasons to research. In fact, we have actually several key questions that still need to be answered. For a start, mesothelioma, for the vast majority of patients, remains an incurable disease. We all know about the personal suffering of patients and families, but also there's a huger, wider economic impact, not only to patients and families, but also wider society. We understand very little about how asbestos changes cells to make them malignant. With research, can we identify an Achilles heel to allow treatments to be highly effective? Can we prevent mesothelioma from occurring in asbestos-exposed patients? Can we identify mesothelioma at a pre-malignant stage to allow cure? And are there different biological subtypes of mesothelioma that need different treatments? The third, perhaps largest reason is that the current treatments that we use are only very modestly active. Can we do better than chemotherapy, which is what we currently use? What role does immunotherapeutics agents have? And who benefits from surgical resection from mesothelioma? Is it everyone, no one, or selected few patients? Finally, if we prove a treatment is effective, usually the NHS does fund it. The fourth biggest reason is that the UK legacy of significant historical asbestos use means that unfortunately mesothelioma will continue to be a major disease burden in the UK for many years, this problem is not going away. So one of the most important types of research that we do in the UK is called a clinical trial. And there are many misunderstandings about clinical trials and how we develop drugs. There are many different ways that we have different trials implemented in the UK, and there are many different types of trial. This slide demonstrates how we turn a chemical into an NHS-funded drug. First of all, we must do preclinical research to see whether the chemical works in the laboratory. Is it also safe in animals? Then we do phase 1 trials, otherwise known as safety-seeking trials. Here we treat handful numbers of patients to see what is the right dose, the right formulation, the right frequency, and see what are the effects in humans. If the compounds are deemed to be safe, we then move into phase 2 trials, which are signal-seeking trials. Here we treat 50 or perhaps up to 150 patients to see, is there a signal that this drug works against the cancer? And is it safe to give? What are the side effects? And then if there is a good signal, we then move into phase 3 trials. These are confirmatory trials where we look at the drug and we compare it to the standard treatment to see if the new drug is better and not more dangerous than the standard treatment. And if that is proven in a scientific manner, we can then move to submit the dossier to the European Medical Agency for Europe for regulatory approval, who look at the safety and the activity, otherwise known as efficacy, and grant a license. And then when the license is granted, then only then will the NHS look at it to see whether it can fund it, otherwise usually known as NICE approval. And the NICE approval is based on the cost effectiveness, not just the effectiveness. Now, this whole process of taking a chemical and completing phase 3 trials previously has taken 10 to 20 years because of the complex nature of doing this research. However, these days with modern trial design and the utility on focusing on highly effective drugs, currently this process can be as little as 5 years, but sometimes does take 10 years. So where can I find out more about clinical trials in the UK? Well, I would suggest that the first stop is the Mesothelioma UK website. You can see the link here, and this is a screen grab of the page. It has a highly effective PDF document that can be downloaded to see what trials are undergoing in the UK. There are more technical resources which are better suited to healthcare professionals, such as the UK NCRI portfolio map and the clinicaltrials.gov website, and I give the URLs here, but often these are inaccurate, and I would say the most accurate at the moment is the Mesothelioma UK website. So what trials do we have going on in the UK? And here are my selected summary. So one that I wanted to talk about is in first line or new patients with a diagnosis of mesothelioma. This is the MARS-2 trial. It's still recruiting. This is an internationally important trial. The world is looking to see what happens with the outcome of this trial. In this trial, patients with mesothelioma all undergo chemotherapy. Patients all undergoing chemotherapy are randomly allocated to receive either surgery or no surgery. And after surgery, patients complete chemotherapy, and if they're randomly allocated to no surgery, they then go on to complete their chemotherapy. This trial is examining whether surgery makes any difference to patients' life. Does it make them live longer? At what cost? And can they complete chemotherapy? It is recruiting in multiple sites in the UK and in Scotland. The next study is the BEAT MESO study. This is a critically important study recruiting in many centres in the UK and is in fact a European international study recruiting in many other countries. In this trial, patients who have a new diagnosis of mesothelioma who are otherwise untreated, that are either unsuitable for surgery or deemed inoperable, are randomised. Patients will all receive chemotherapy or bevacizumab, so biochemotherapy, state-of-the-art drug therapy, or exactly that with the addition of immunotherapy. And in this trial, we as the investigators are looking to see whether the combination of biochemotherapy with immunotherapy is superior than just chemobiotherapy. And we're looking to see whether patients live longer and what the side effect profile is. This is an important trial which, if it does show that patients live longer, could potentially result in this combination, chemo-bio-immunotherapy, a 4-drug combination, becoming a new standard of care. Another study that's still recruiting in the UK is another European study. This is the NEMO study. It's looking at a drug called nintedanib. Nintedanib is a tablet that's taken to reduce the fibrosis and change the blood vasculature within tumours. In this trial, patients who have completed chemotherapy as their first type of treatment in whom the disease is under control are randomly allocated to either standard follow-up with a placebo or standard follow-up with the addition of nintedanib. It's ongoing at various sites within the UK and also Italy and Belgium. Now, for patients who've had first-line treatment such as chemotherapy and the disease has unfortunately relapsed, there is no good consensus on what should be the next type of treatment. In general, chemotherapy again has relatively modest benefit. In this setting, there's an important study run by my colleagues at Leicester and also open at Newcastle called the MIST study. This is a phase 2 trial looking for a signal of activity. It's a biologically driven trial. In this trial, all patients will undergo molecular analysis of their tumour, and if they have a variety of molecular abnormalities, which we sometimes see in mesothelioma, they will then be allocated a particular drug depending on the molecular abnormality. And then all of the results of the patient together with their tumour will be analysed biologically to see, are these drugs effective? And what is the right biological biomarker to see whether these drugs are effective? This is a very important UK-led study. Another important trial which is open in the UK and in fact open internationally is for relapse patients, patients that have had upfront chemotherapy whose disease has now relapsed. In this trial, patients are randomly allocated to receive either celecoxib, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, everybody gets celecoxib, and then gemcitabine chemotherapy, which we know has some activity in mesothelioma, but half of the patients get an injection once of a virus into their pleural cavity, into their chest. Now, this virus is an attenuated normal virus which secretes interferon. So it's looking to see whether interferon, which is an immunotherapeutic injected into the chest, enhances the activity of gemcitabine. This is a really important study which is recruiting in various centres in the UK and also internationally. Now, there are many other studies which have closed in the UK, and I wanted to highlight 2 key trials. The first key trial is a potential game changer. This is the Checkmate 743 trial. This is an international trial with leadership within the UK run by the pharma company BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb. It took patients who had a new diagnosis of mesothelioma and randomly allocated them to either the standard of care cisplatin or carboplatin plus pemetrexed chemotherapy or a completely novel combination of double immunotherapy, nivolumab and ipilimumab. Now, why are we excited by this? We're excited because in April, BMS released a press release to say that the combination immunotherapy prolongs survival compared to chemotherapy. Now, this data is not yet presented. We don't know any of the results. We don't know who benefits. We don't know how much they benefit by. We don't know the side effect profile in any significant detail in mesothelioma, although we do use these drugs, nivolumab and ipilimumab, in other types of cancers such as lung cancer. This has the potential to completely revolutionize the face of mesothelioma moving forward, and these results are highly anticipated. The next study I wanted to talk about is the CONFIRM trial. This is a UK-led study led by my colleague Professor Fennell in Leicester, in which patients who had relapsed after first-line treatment with chemotherapy were randomly allocated either placebo intravenously or the immune checkpoint inhibitor immunotherapy nivolumab. This is a really important trial looking to see whether nivolumab makes patients live longer compared to not having any treatment for those with relapsed disease. Now, we don't know the results of this study. We expect that we'll have results of this study either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. And if beneficial, this will likely lead to nivolumab approval for relapsed mesothelioma, a very important study indeed. So, looking into my crystal ball, what's happening in the future? We see that all the focus of research in mesothelioma is around immune modulation of mesothelioma. Can we make the body's immune system fight effectively to help control mesothelioma? We've seen some tantalizing signals in patients to date, and we have a number of new areas that we're looking at. We're looking at something called CAR T cells. These are modified patients' T cells which are collected from their blood to be changed in the laboratory to then be re-fed back into the patient to see whether they can kill the cancer. And there's a similar type of immunomodulatory cell therapy called TIL therapy. We're also looking at vaccine therapy. There's a trial of something called a dendritic cell vaccine ongoing in Europe, and we're also looking at transgenic virotherapy. Can we inject viruses either into the pleural cavity or into the mesothelioma directly for the viruses either to kill the mesothelioma or to deposit an immunotherapeutic? But there are many questions. Do these strategies actually work? Who might they benefit? Who gets no benefit? And are the side effects worth it? We can't complete a talk about research without talking about COVID and its impact in the UK. Now, everyone knows about this. We know that in the 30th of January, NHS England declared a level 4 major incident and took control of the health service. On the 2nd of March, NHS England asked hospitals to set up COVID-19 incident management teams for hospitals to consider closing to clinical trials, which allow patients to be that are on trials to be cared for, but not to allow new patients to be recruited. And most laboratories that were doing basic research drew up plans to wind up and then completely close. On the 16th of March, the NIHR, which is the Department of Health Research Wing, asked all networks to pause new studies to focus on delivering COVID research, to deliver research looking at how COVID can be treated, the pandemic response. By the 17th of March, NHS England outlined changes for the outbreak for hospitals, including postponing all elective operations and purchasing additional capacity in the private sector. And by the end of April, the 29th of April, the NHS wrote to all organisations to restart urgent non-COVID care and elective surgery. And by the 21st of May, the NIHR, which is the Department of Health Research Wing, published a framework to restart research, prioritising research into level 1, COVID pandemic research, level 2, possible life-prolonging research, where most cancer research sits, and level 3, other research. But worryingly, in June 2020, whilst clinical trials have started to reopen in many centres, not in all centres in the UK, and in a very staggered approach, CRUK announced a huge £150 million reduction per year into research funding, which will undoubtedly have a devastating impact in UK cancer research, given that Cancer Research UK funds such a large amount of research. So, what are my conclusions? Mesothelioma research remains critical to improving the outcomes for patients now and in the future. I would say that the UK leads mesothelioma research globally, with forefront UK investigators working in partnership with patients, their advocates and charities, for example Cancer Research UK, the NIHR, the Medical Research Council and Mesothelioma UK, with a broad portfolio of ongoing trials. Of course, this includes the British Lung Foundation as well. COVID-19 has devastated all cancer research globally, and the UK is no exception, with research only now slowly starting up again. However, there remains a global interest to improve outcomes in mesothelioma, and only through active patient research, engagement, advocacy and support can we continue to improve our outcomes in mesothelioma. Undoubtedly, together, we can beat this disease through research. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I do hope you found this presentation useful. And next is my colleague David Gold from the IOSH. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. David Gold, and I'm a Vice President of the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, otherwise known as IOSH. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to present how IOSH is tackling occupational cancer caused by work-related asbestos exposure through its No Time to Lose campaign. The Institution of Occupational Safety and Health is the world's chartered professional body for safety and health at work. With over 48,000 members in 130 countries, we act as a champion, advisor, advocate, and trainer for safety and health professionals working in organizations of all sizes and in most sectors. We're a professional body, a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We're independent and nonpartisan. We invest in research. We develop free resources and training courses. And we provide guidance for occupational safety and health practitioners to support members in creating workplaces that are safer, healthier, and more sustainable for everyone. Right now, our members are hard at work supporting their colleagues, leadership teams, and suppliers as they adapt to new health protection needs and behaviors during the current COVID-19 pandemic. IOSH has developed a range of resources to help businesses manage the spread of the disease and return safely to work through its Return Safely campaign. IOSH has a vision, a safe and a healthy world of work. We know that realizing this, moving toward it, brings benefits for people and businesses, communities, societies, and economies. The current framework for achieving this vision is our Work 2022 strategy, designed to align with changing work patterns and workplaces structured around an approach where we collaborate to influence and enhance in ways that will achieve a safer, healthier world of work. To focus our work efficiently on key concerns within the broad span of safety, health, and well-being, IOSH has 6 priority areas, including occupational cancer, where the issue of asbestos falls. In Britain, more than 5,000 people a year die from an asbestos-related cancer. Mesothelioma, an incurable asbestos-related cancer, claims at least 2,500 lives a year. Tradespeople, in particular, are at high risk of exposure, as around 20 die a week from cancer caused by asbestos exposure. Even though asbestos is banned in Britain, thousands of tons of asbestos can still be found in domestic and commercial buildings, industrial plants, and equipment. Exposure to asbestos also causes diseases including pleural plaques, asbestosis, and lung cancer. And all of these deaths typically occur 20 to 40 years following exposure. Let me share with you just an anecdote from my past. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not British, I'm American, I'm Bostonian. And when I was a safety and health practitioner in the United States, one of my areas that I was looking at was the work around shipyards and building ships in the New England area. And one of the behaviors that I observed was a worker, for example, a welder, working on the deck of a ship, inside a ship. So to avoid fire, they wrapped themselves in asbestos blankets when they were doing their work. And they were not symptomatic. They had no feelings or no knowledge of asbestos or asbestosis at that point. But the whole issue 20, 30 years later surfaces as a cancer that can be indeed devastating. A survey was done in March 2018 of UK tradespeople. Ahead of the launch of the asbestos phase of the IOSH No Time to Lose campaign in April 2018, IOSH commissioned Opinion, an organization, to survey 500 tradespeople to understand the scale and the scope of the issue. Some of the key findings, which you will see on this slide, are 15% have never been informed of the asbestos risk. A quarter, or 25%, say they've been exposed to asbestos. A further 42% say they may have been. A third never checked the asbestos register before starting work on a new site, with 15% of those not even being aware that there is a register. Nearly 1 in 5 wouldn't know what to do if they found asbestos, and only 2/3 of respondents recognized the signs of lung disease caused by asbestos exposure. While this survey was conducted among construction workers, the risk of asbestos exposure are present across many more sectors. There are 8 key steps to managing asbestos, and let me share these with you. The whole idea or the goal is to avoid the accidental release of asbestos fibers that people can breathe in. The first step is to know where the asbestos is. A systematic survey should be carried out. In the UK, this is called a management survey, to identify visually and sample for the presence and condition of ACMs throughout all accessible areas of the building and associated with plant or equipment. The second step is to record where it is, to create a record. In the UK, this is called an asbestos register that identifies what asbestos was found and where. The third step is a complete risk assessment, something that is very commonly known to safety and health professionals, but it should be strongly known to people that are dealing with asbestos as well. And that risk assessment would cover all locations where ACMs have been found and consider who is responsible for managing asbestos in the organization. And should the ACM be removed, protected, and encapsulated. The fifth step is to plan to work on asbestos materials, ACMs. So when you're planning invasive construction work, a refurbishment or demolition, a survey is needed. The sixth step is to inform those who are potentially exposed. As a general principle, when the work may disturb asbestos, workers should be informed of the level of risk to health and what precautions they must implement to keep themselves and others safe. Contractors are much more likely to disturb ACMs if they are unfamiliar with the location, so consider how you will make the latest version of the asbestos register and management plan available to the contractors. The seventh point is to train workers. It's a good practice to provide asbestos awareness training to workers whose activity may disturb or damage ACMs. You can use the free IOSH No Time to Lose asbestos resource to educate workers and contractors. And the eighth and final point is investigate asbestos incidents. An accidental ACM damage incident must be investigated to identify its cause. You need to know what to do if you accidentally disturb asbestos-containing materials. The plan for dealing with accidental damage to ACMs must include 6 points of action to deal with what needs to be done. So the first thing is, when something is disturbed that contains an asbestos material, number one, stop work immediately. Number two, move everyone away and ensure nobody enters the area. Number three, do not remove or do not move equipment or materials. Number four, close, seal, and lock off the area. Number 5, put up warning signs. And number 6, immediately report it to your employer. Carry out an investigation. In your investigation, you want to include whether the ACM was damaged. The ACM that was damaged was recorded in the asbestos register, and if not, why not? Whether the asbestos management plan had been followed, and again, if not, why not? Whether contractors and/or workers had up-to-date training, and if not, why not? Whether contractors and/or workers had received the correct information prior to starting the work, and if not, why not? Whether contractors and/or workers had followed the emergency procedures correctly, if not, why not? And whether the cleanup, make safe, or removal procedure is being followed properly. As I mentioned earlier, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, IOSH, has a program called the No Time to Lose campaign. It addresses occupational cancer and aims to do several things. The main point of this campaign is to raise awareness. Work-based carcinogens are largely under the radar, and we need to raise their profile if we want to see more action to control them. Responsible businesses are doing a lot of what is required, but they need to do more. So IOSH is developing free resources to help them. Finally, we're encouraging organizations to make commitments to prevent carcinogenic exposures at work. And this is improving policy and practice. So whether you're an employer or employee, an industrial body, or a policymaker, or a safety and health professional, or an industrial hygienist, we all have an important part to play if we want to call time on work-related cancers. We can beat occupational cancer if we work together to control the exposure risks. We have launched 4 phases so far of the No Time to Lose campaign. These are diesel exhaust emissions, solar radiation, silica dust, and as we're talking about today, asbestos. I'll now explain the 3 steps of how you can get involved in this campaign. The first step is downloading from the IOSH website and distributing our free resources. We have worked with supportive businesses to develop a range of practical resources to help manage carcinogens in the workplace. On the campaign website, everyone can download free materials to help manage diesel fumes, solar radiation, silica dust, and asbestos at work. You'll find everything there from fact sheets, posters, leaflets to films, presentations, infographics, and case studies. The second step is to become an official campaign supporter. Organizations can support the campaign by providing a few sentences to reflect their commitment to taking action to prevent occupational cancers. We now have 400 organizations supporting the No Time to Lose campaign, and all have offered to raise awareness via their communications channels. We also provide supporter resources to help communicate campaign messages. The third step is to sign up to our pledge. The pledge is a 6-point action plan, which involves businesses or companies committing to, number 1, assessing the risks, number 2, developing and delivering a prevention strategy, number 3, briefing managers, number 4, engaging employees, number 5, demanding the same standards of their supply chain, and number 6, reporting on progress made. Currently, 130 businesses, and you see a sample of this on the slide, around the world have signed up to the campaign pledge. They have been recognized for their significant commitment to tackling carcinogens at work on our campaign website, in communication, and with a no time to lose certificate. I'd like to wish you, your families, your colleagues well. Be safe, be healthy, and please feel free to turn to us at IOSH if we can be of any further assistance to you. Thank you very much.
Introducing our next patient voice, Paul Cook was diagnosed with mesothelioma in 2017 and is chairman of the charity Erase Meso.
Hi, my name is Paul Cook. I'm one of the founders of the charity Erase Meso, which was set up to raise funds for scientific research into finding a cure for mesothelioma. Probably more importantly, I was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma in 2017. Now, I've never worked in construction, with asbestos, been in the military, or any of the other workplaces that are more commonly associated with the disease. Now, I was also 45 when diagnosed, so I don't meet any of the stereotypes. Since being diagnosed, I've undergone various treatments, and for the time being, I can say I'm cancer-free. I was asked to speak today about my journey since being diagnosed, which obviously I'm more than happy to do, especially if it provides a little bit of hope, which is so lacking with this horrible disease. Now, one thing I would say, it's important to mention that everyone's different and each person will have their own approach. This is just my story and what I did. So the background to this. In 2017, I was running my own business, and ironically, but luckily, I decided to get reasonably fit that year. I was cycling to work 3-4 times a week. I'd started to learn to play tennis and to kite surf. During the summer, I'd completed a couple of cycling challenges. I've been on a pretty active family holiday in September. Now, during the October of 2017, I started to get night sweats, which were odd as I didn't have flu and felt relatively fine the next day. Then I got pain in between my shoulder blades, and it hurt a lot to take a deep breath. Pretty common symptoms I now realise, but at the time I didn't know anything about mesothelioma. But I was working really, really hard at the time, and I thought it was stress. So I carried on working, and I tried to reduce the stress with some exercise, although by now I felt pretty dreadful. So the week before I first ended up in hospital, I cycled about 100 miles, and then the pain got really, really bad. And it was actually my wife who forced me to go to A&E. After a big row, I hastened to add that I'd be fine. It turns out, and I had pneumonia, fluid in the lung, and a collapsed lung. Now, following the lung being drained, I had a VATS procedure to reinflate my lung and was sent home to recuperate. I was making great progress physically following the operation and was well ahead of schedule as far as I was concerned. And I had the 2-week follow-up consultation post-operation, I'll never forget, on the 14th of November. And it was in that meeting that I was diagnosed and my life changed forever. In fact, I was told I had some cancerous cells, and at that stage I was pretty pragmatic. I'm positive, to be honest. So I said, okay, so what do we need to do? And they said, we've got something called mesothelioma. I was like, fine, so what do we do? And they said, we're not very good at curing that one. And when I asked what that meant, they said, well, there is no cure. Now, I mean, this couldn't be happening to me. I had a 5-year-old son at the time. And unless you've been through it, no one will truly understand that feeling you get with that kind of prognosis. I was numb, shocked, terrified. Life really had changed forever right at that moment, although it had not even slightly begun to sink in exactly what that meant. We'd been told not to look at the internet. So as you can imagine, since we got home, my wife was Googling mesothelioma. Frankly, she was desperately trying to find some hope, some good news, which is actually the main reason that I was keen to speak today. I remember her saying things to me like, look, I found this person, they were diagnosed a year ago and they're still alive. I found someone else and they were diagnosed 2 years ago. I mean, I could have screamed, 2 years. In September, I'd been mountain biking, I've been on holiday, I was running a business, starting to kite surf, and now suddenly I'm told I've got terminal cancer, and people are getting excited about the fact that there's someone else that's still alive 2 years later. All those questions. What am I going to tell my son? What am I going to tell my mother? It can't be true. My son's only 5. All of those things go through your mind. Everything then seemed to happen so slowly and yet so fast. An appointment had already been made for me to see an oncologist. I was starting chemo the following week. There was then a decision whether to have surgery. The process had started, this roller coaster, and I didn't even understand what mesothelioma really was. And I remember the first chemo. I was told it would last a couple of hours. I was terrified following the chemo chat. One thing I would say, I mean, for the medical community, if anyone's watching, is that, that's one thing I'd change tomorrow. I understand that the medical profession has to cover itself in this litigious environment and also prepare patients. But I was being told about side effects that the oncology nurse had never seen in a 25-year career. I mean, I was absolutely terrified. But anyway, my couple of hours of first chemo turned out to be 10.5 hours. I was transferred to a ward. My body reacted really badly to it, and I was hospitalised. Must say though, the next day I wasn't too bad. I thought, okay, this is fine. And then of course the steroids wore off. The fog in my head was terrible, and it's something that continued every chemo session. And the fact, and it's something that went on long after the various treatments had stopped. The objective with me was to have 3 rounds of chemo before having surgery, which I decided to have, followed by radiotherapy, and then back onto the chemo. And I was lucky in the end to have responded well to the chemo, as there was a shrinkage of about 30% before surgery. Now, I had an operation to remove the lining of my lung, together with any tumours. This was a pretty terrifying ordeal. One is, will you make it through the operation? And secondly, what will you be like afterwards? And it was around this time, bizarrely, that I decided that if I make it through the surgery, I was going to do 2 things. One, I was going to start a charity to raise funds for research. And the second thing, I was going to cycle the UK, 1,000 miles across the UK. Now, I'm pleased to say, obviously, I made it through the operation, but it was really difficult to prepare for what comes next. It is, without doubt, for me, it was the most painful thing that I've ever been through. But let's be clear, it saved my life. My surgeon and his medical team were amazing, not just in terms of the op, but the way I was looked after for the next few weeks. But it was this time in hospital that I decided I would start training the day I got out and for the rest of my life. Now, again, it's important to mention here that everyone is different, there are different circumstances, everyone's in a different position. This is just what I did. But when I was diagnosed originally, I changed my diet. I started mindfulness to the amazement of everyone around me. I started to exercise to combat the chemo. And then, post-surgery, I went through 3 more chemos together with radiotherapy. I reacted really badly to the radiotherapy. I seemed to go downhill with every chemo session, including being hospitalized a few times. But amazingly, I was then given the good news that for the time being, the treatments had worked, and I'm here to tell the tale. Now, although being diagnosed with mesothelioma is awful, I was lucky in some ways. The surgeon who reinflated my lung had a suspicion that it was mesothelioma. She sent my results back to the lab twice to test for meso, because I wasn't in that sort of meso bucket, if you like, due to my work history and age, so they didn't suspect it. I had access to great medical care. My oncologist was and continues to be amazing. I was younger and also had started to get fit. But in terms of my journey, I'd committed early on to do whatever I could to fight this disease. So what did that mean for me? I changed my diet. I don't eat a lot of red meat, for example. I cut out the sugar. I take supplements. I try and get my 5 a day in. I drink green tea. By the way, I still can't stand, but I still do try and drink 4 to 5 cups a day. I've tried to reduce stress in my life, but to be honest, I think that comes with perspective. And I exercise. Now, I committed to exercise when I was diagnosed. I did this from the start, throughout all of the various treatments. During chemo, I had to drag myself out of bed, but I always felt better afterwards. The frustrating thing was that during the treatments, I just got weaker, whatever I did. But when I got home from surgery, I got out of the car and the first thing I did was walk around the block, albeit very, very slowly. I was with my father-in-law. I almost passed out, but I'd done it. And from then on, every day I would go out for walks, and I'd start with a few hundred steps, building it up to a few thousand, up to 10,000 each day. I then started getting on the bike and trying to do a few miles. I then started working with a physio, which I would definitely recommend to anyone who's being diagnosed, doing Pilates, trying to rebuild some strength. This was a really long process. I mean, at one point I was doing and failing with 1 kilogram weights, much to the amusement of my 5-year-old. Now, in September 29, I mean, what that led to is that myself and a bunch of friends, to whom I will forever be grateful, we cycled the UK just under 1,000 miles in 10 days. Now, what made it all the more special for me is that I'd met another person online in one of the mesothelioma groups who had a terrible prognosis similar to mine. His name is Nigel Shaddick. I was going down the more traditional route, shall we say, in terms of radiotherapy, chemo, surgery, and he was on a trial. I asked him whilst I was in hospital just after surgery whether he'd like to join me. Bizarrely and amazingly, he said yes, and we crossed the finish line together in September 2019. Now, I still train all the time, and most people don't realise what I have to do to live a normal life. I'm lucky because I do live a normal-ish life. But look, if I don't do weights or certain exercises, my right shoulder will drop a few inches and be very painful. If I don't get my lung moving, it hurts and can be difficult to breathe. I still get really bad fatigue, bizarrely about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But if I get out, I'm able to combat that. I have to work at this and work really hard. But I'm grateful because I'm alive. Life is fairly normal. I'm as active, probably more active than I've ever been. I now ski, kiteboard, cycle. I'm about to start playing tennis again. In fact, there's not much I can't do, but I have to work it. I do between 1 and 2 hours, sort of some sort of exercise or stretching or whatever it means, or whatever a day. For anyone who's recently diagnosed with mesothelioma, it is a terrifying experience for everyone, for patients, for families. All I would say is that there is some hope out there. And since becoming more involved with mesothelioma, there are a number of people out there who have been diagnosed who are beating the statistics. You would have heard from Mavis Nye earlier. I mean, she's a shining example. She's amazing. She was amazing to me when I was diagnosed, kind of matriarch of mesothelioma. She's been fighting this disease for 10 years or more, plus campaigning, plus providing support, plus being mother hen to all of us. An amazing lady. But I'd like to finish with a couple of things. I realise how lucky I am to be here. I have great medical care and support from friends and family. My approach is not the blueprint for what you should do, but I do think that we all need to do everything we can to fight this disease. Lastly, there is so much to do in mesothelioma. One thing that I'm very passionate about, and it's a key objective for our charity, Raise Meso, is to raise awareness about mesothelioma and the dangers of asbestos. One of the issues is that people do not realise it's a problem. When I was diagnosed, I'd never heard of it. My mum still can't pronounce it. She can't spell it. This has got to change. I would ask for your help. Our call to action for anyone touched by mesothelioma is Action Mesothelioma Day 2021. We're planning on having a national event and making it bigger than it's ever been before. And we want to bring the whole community together, whether that be patient, carer, charity, support group, lawyers, people from the asbestos and construction industry. A number of the charities were already in discussion and making plans. And we'd like everyone to come together on this day next year, and there'll be more on this to follow. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you.
I would like to thank all the speakers and those involved for their valuable contributions today to this important Action Meso Day event. Special thanks to the patients whose voices are so powerful and crucial to spread the awareness message. Thank you to you for taking the time to watch. Also, please do support the various charities involved if you can. They need your support now more than ever. Some asbestos and other support groups will be following this event with their own online activity. You can find information on our website. Of course, if you need mesothelioma information or advice, you can contact your support and asbestos support groups or Mesothelioma UK on 0800 169 2409. Mesothelioma UK will be on Facebook Live after this, or every Tuesday at 11 AM. On behalf of all UKMA members, our very best wishes, and we look forward to Action Meso Day 2021.